Oh, is that what it is?
We're live.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe look at that too. Hello, world. Najez Temple back again. We're discussing all things Najez in our Enlightenment Salon, having great conversations and getting our shiny on at the same time. Tonight we'll be talking about three things. One is the Najez, as part of the Nez Alpha, have a sort of idea-based or pattern-driven ego. And we've mentioned a lot how the Nai has that, but actually the Ni does as well. We'll discuss that a bit. The other one is, I believe, was it Maya the Bee was asking about heredity? Also Alcides, I believe, was a conversation. So we'll just touch a bit on what we know so far with how much the Rosetta Stone is filled in on heredity patterns, how that's working out when we see the data. And then the third topic, the one we'll spend more time on at the end, is talking about Najez, how they view their other, and they make them go, whoa, like powers they have or ways they do things. It kind of just sort of like stuns your image, go, whoa, both in a good way, and then also in a way where you're not sure if it's good, and I guess also bad as well. So kind of a little spectrum there. Whoa, awesome. Whoa, not sure what this is. Whoa, that freaks me out in a bad way. All right, so those are the plans, introductions, and we'll get into it. I am Nai G Coach.
Oh, yeah. I am Nai G Ben.
This is Nai G Glenn.
I am Nijai Bruno.
Excellent. So on the topic of the ego, today, for example, I can feel myself getting excited. Like right now, I'm not sitting down because I'm too.
Oh
like,
yeah, I have that too, Coach.
Yeah, we
I'm
noticed.
really excited. I just don't sit. I don't sit.
Yeah, and basically, short version is I'm feeling this like. From a Nai point of view, there's anger, but I want to make it bigger than that. Obviously, the Nai will talk about that angle of it. What I want to talk about is like the Nez, like I'm seeing things, patterns, and seeing the patterns, both for Nai and Ni. The more you see of more important, more true patterns, you get like worked up. Everyone has that, but for the Najez and also the Nazez, the Nez powers first, and when it gets really, really stimulated, it kind of gets into a state of high ego, and this can be done directive or adaptive way. Impatience for the ideas to be seen by other people, to be recognized, to be used, to be picked up on, to be shared. So it's like whoa, and then on that, I think a good place to start where you see that for the Nez Alpha, and then obviously the Najez do it everywhere else as well, but where the Nez Alpha share a lot of ground is in comedy. And there is an ego, sort of like the kid in class who doesn't want to go along with what is scripted for today's activities. Nez Alpha overwhelmingly would fit that, and that's why they are overwhelmingly represented in comedy. Other comedians are as well. For example, both the Nez Towers, and they almost always have really developed what? Nez.
Mm-hmm.
Comedians always have, whatever the mojo is, if they're a comedian, their Nez will be bonus stacked. And a part of that, Nai does it directed, which is why it's often seen as having like that ego, because it's more like planned. But Ni also does it in an irrepressible way, which is, I don't feel like doing today's planned class activity, so I'm not going to. Now I'm going to make a joke. I'm going to take what I want to talk about and what you people are talking about, and I'm going to make a connection. I'm going to bounce it or shift it, and then it's going to be what I want to do. Even if it's only for a moment. Naiji might go long-term subversive and try like, mind job. Ni will often do Russell Brand or other kind of Ni Alpha comedians or Ni's are classic, where they just keep disrupting for little moments. And that adds up over class, probably. Maybe 45-minute class, you maybe got 20 minutes of teaching in there, maybe. Because of all those interruptions.
I used to get pulled aside after class a lot, being like, Bruno, you gotta stop interrupting the class because we're not going to talk about what you want to talk about because that's not in the syllabus because that has nothing to do with what it is very interesting. They would try to say something, but we're not going to. So you got to calm down. And
because both of these powers, they're going to take it off track in a way.
Yeah. That has good and bad to it.
I think that actually built up over my lifetime. Like when I was younger, like it would just sort of happen and teachers just ignored it. Then when I would when I got to about like middle school, I think it started getting really bad, and then teachers would really like make it a point to be like, you got to stop doing this. You got to calm down. Like I would have like they couldn't go off on me too much because I would often get the highest grade in the class.
Right.
I mean, in the smallest class, without really trying. But I mean, it wasn't a very competitive school. You know, it was like in
Right.
when I was in middle school, we'd already moved from Brazil, from Sao Paulo to South Carolina. So it was a pretty small school. It wasn't like I was up against a ton of kids, you know. So it was really easy for me to just do it. And so then the teachers, they just sort of had to roll with it when I would do that, like interrupt class constantly and just throw out tons of little vi here and there. I would just like throw tons of little vi things at them that they couldn't say no because it's true, but they're like, this is only tangentially related.
Because that makes comedy, if it's done well, is you'll connect patterns in a way that disrupt the thought patterns. Even audiences, they actually go there for that purpose. Like, disrupt my thought patterns. Do it. That's what comedians do. They basically want to trip on that. Do it to me. But Nez is also often early on in like regimented things like schooling or family environment. You're like, I don't know, today's activities seem boring. I'm gonna see if I can't mix it up a little bit here. You know what I mean? And if it gets like too oppressive, where you can't even do comedy, then it becomes like subversive. Do you know what I mean? Meeting in secret. Both the Nez, Ni Alpha and Ni Alpha, like subversive, hard to find clubs and communities and exotic stuff and things like that. It's exciting. You'll hear that a lot, for example, as a theme in a lot of the acting Nez Alpha. I was only kind of put this together recently as a theme. They talk about adventures throughout their life in movies they've been in or countries they were in when they were filming the movie. And a large part of it is kind of like jumping about. Like I went and talked to this royal person, then I went down here to like the, illegal such and such house, and like moving around like that, the liquidiness. Being able to basically just move through borders, either a hunter way or in a gather way, but the Nez likes to kind of just ignore borders. And they talk about that a lot as if that's a life well lived. The Nezes share this. So it's not like a values-based thing. It's very heavily Nez-related because they hear like the Nizi, like the guys talking, oh yes, I did this and that. And they always talk about basically, I was in this country hanging out with my other actor friend, and we did this thing that you're not supposed to do. This thing we're not supposed to do, ha ha ha, that was funny and awesome. That's a life, and a life of experiences that you're not supposed to have, that's the best life. That's a kind of common sentiment that's held by all the Nez Alpha, whether they speak it out or not, just the way they talk about life. The fact that you went to a club and something happened that's not supposed to happen, best night ever. If it wasn't supposed to happen and it happened, sometimes it goes bad, but generally, Nez can make it go good, even if it's neutral. Nez kind of has this. If we were going to an evening for such and such, and then some wild such and such happened, even like it's not good, it's just something that happened, it's a plus. It's a plus for being interesting.
Yeah,
Nez,
I agree with that. Yeah.
Nez gives a plus for being interesting.
You know what? That actually brings up something that I want to share, which is me and my dad. We actually went to this one like McDonald's one time, and it was really like we just went there to like go and eat, but it was in a little bit more of a rougher area of the city, and so this one dude came in and he had a gun, and he was in the washroom or something, and he shot this guy, and the guy. It was later found out that the guy died, and we ran out of there. We were like out of there, so we were not around for any of the the crazy things. Crazy shit to happen to us or anything like that. So my dad was like very keen on that. He heard something and he was like, okay, let's go. And I was like, okay, let's go. I didn't know what was going on, but I was like, this is horrible. This is a horrible experience. But it was interesting. It kind of was like something to think about, something to talk about. I went home and I told my family about it, and then they were like, oh, and this happened. And then we watched the news and we heard about the guy, and then we found out that it was like drug dealing going on. Yeah.
Can I pause you for a second there, Glenn? You said
Sure.
two statements back to back that were actually great principles. Boom, boom. One is, I forget what word you did it in, but basically, for yourself, that's going to give an enlightenment opportunity bonus generally. Probably you're going to like, man, I was different after that night or that summer because it was different than anything expected. The other side of it was the external beat, which is also when you talk to people, Nez Alpha tend to, more than the other mojos, that's why so many are comedians, for example, they will immediately start a conversation by being funny, or if they don't go for direct humor, they'll do this. They'll introduce a story or a way of doing things that immediately says, I do things different. And they play it, the Ni Alpha tend to be more like, kind of like, hee, cheeky, you can't control me. They'll break rules. In fact, in the banter between the Ni Alpha and Ni Alpha, there's kind of like a little bit of rule breaking as a way to like let you know, hey, almost that sounds funny. It's like you're not a square. You know what I mean? Like you kind of like the eye contact we talk about so much among Nez Alpha, where you kind of like notice each other using Nez to look at the environment, and then you see each other. And when you do these little things where you wink or do something, a quick little movement where you just like stare at them a certain way. It lets them know like, hey, I see you over there, Nezin. So what often goes along with that, you'll see this in a lot of movies, for example. And often, again, this gets back to like real life stories and interviews where they talk about how they would meet people or like mates. They'll mention how they did something transgressive. They were on a cruise ship, and then I was sneaking away to get an extra champagne, and this Nizi dude, he was sneaking away to get free such and such. We were both in the cargo hold stealing. Oh, it was so adorable. That's a very common theme in like a zillion different variables. But that theme, we were kind of breaking the rules, and that's how we met each other. And that's how we knew, you're like me.
That's cool.
You know what? Oh, on that, Bruno, you'll see that theme hugely because you're mentioning about, for example, a lot of the Nejez power duos. There's like so many of those in the music. A part of that is often they'll talk about, oh, we were in school, and I just could not deal with school, and they'll talk about how they're basically either acting out or shutting down or whatever, and this other person was also acting out or shutting down, and zoom, that brought us together, and bam, now you have this band. You're welcome, world.
Speaking of which,
So I guess in a nutshell, I guess really, you know what, this is kind of a fascinating topic. I'd love to talk to Geraldine Demas about this. There's just inherent ego in all the channels and what they do, if you think about it. Nye has the kind of classic one because like it wants to do it its own particular sort of almost myopic way. But also, the Ni, for example, has the ego of, I want to be able to just go and do whatever I want. I don't want anything to hem me in. And you have to have an ego to kind of shrug it off. It's not the premeditated ego of Nye, but it reacts anytime you try to grab it. So what I was going to say there is there's like an ego to the cagey. Because caginess is basically, I don't want to be trapped and I don't want to do what you guys are doing. So I think like other channels, like the Jez, is the ego of getting worked up, having your emotions, your passions worked up. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, come on now, calm down. No. I don't think I will.
It's interesting, Coach. You said myopic as far as like the Ni Alpha way of doing it. That seems kind of a little bit like a negative kind of way of putting it.
I was teasing.
Oh, okay.
Basically, Univision version, which is what it is. It's Univision that breaks down and then molts into a new Universion. But it doesn't tend to do like lots of little things. That's what Ni is the best at. It juggles lots of little things. Ni's like big bubble, gets everything, pop the big bubble. Quasi-death, bigger bubble, pop that bubble, big. So it's always basically you're trying to get one bubble. Even when you like quasi-death, you start over from scratch, you're that one little bubble that grows back bigger. You know what I mean? But in the beginning, you don't have multiple bubbles. Ni always gets multiple bubbles. Their issue, therefore, is since they have multiple bubbles going initially, is being diffused, feeling pulled everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But as a part of that, there's the ego of like, I definitely want anyone, kind of holding them anywhere.
That's like really something interesting that I've noted with Nijai too, is that they definitely have that irrepressibility, which is really like cool to see. and it's sort of like they don't ever want any. Sometimes it can go too far, where it's like I don't want you to give any sort of structure or anything like that. Don't label this anything. This is just the experience. Just feel it. You know, so it can be sort of like that. But then that's when it's like gone off the rails a little bit. But there's an appreciation definitely of like somebody that just doesn't like a mind that doesn't allow for any sort of being pushed on in any kind of way that they would find inappropriate. Then they will, because they're just going to bounce back and like, you know, they're not going to take that essentially. So it's kind of cool. I find that very interesting.
On that, I think you need that basic kind of sort of momentum ego that every mojo needs to have. And I think Nesmo, Alpha, for example, deal a lot where they try to find outlets where they can basically go off script when they want to. Now, some of them get more in trouble for it. So that'd be one thing that temples could really help people with, is kind of training you how to use those things to basically disrupt scripted activities or prescribed activities. So that's going to happen, but you can be more knowing about it. Even if you're going to be transgressive, it's better to actually know you're doing it. Do you know what I mean? You'd be like an active, say, civil disobedience. It's better to know, like, oh, I'm going to do some civil disobedience. I'm going to go do a sit-down protest or something. Do you know what I mean? When you do this kind of thing, it's better to kind of know you're doing it. It'll be a better outcome. So, because I think what happens, I think you're talking about, Glenn, is I think a lot of times early on, your family may try to not want you to do it because the family has a script. You wake up sometimes, especially different cultures. You wake up and you're supposed to do things in the day. There's like expectations. From the moment you get up till you go to bed, there are expectations, and so Nez is going to like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll just stay up till 4 a.m. Whatever.
Exactly. And so it's interesting. I think sometimes it can become really great, but I think it's easy to start reacting to where you. I think one of two things can happen. It sort of shuts down. Obviously, three things. The best option is it does not shut down and it becomes healthy. But I think two other options that do happen frequently, because people don't really know what's going on, is like in a family or school or just general, I'll say, cultural bubble. So the school, home, and the neighborhood, those three major influences may all say, don't do anything like that. And so the Nez shuts down after a while. It's difficult for any of the Nez Alpha, actually any interpretive, because you need to be kind of doing that witty play in order to make the scientific breakthroughs, to make the art, to even do just clever, campaign strategizing. You need to have that idea-based ego, and if it's been told not to do the kind of basic pattern of it, if you see any of the Ni Alpha or Ni Alpha or combinations of them together, they basically just start making little quips. It doesn't have to be like classic comedian. It might even be dry, like observations. But keep making these little pattern-based observations, and that will disrupt the script. And doing that keeps almost like that muscle loose and warm and built up. It can atrophy if it doesn't get to do that. For example, just having like Bruno around and having Infiniti come over, it increases like the conversations I'm having, and I can feel my fluency muscle getting stronger, and that makes everything stronger. Check the Nez Alpha having like the ability to like jump patterns back and forth quickly, and then our secondary momentum, which is also really important, is being able to get worked up. That's another thing is a lot of times you're generally not supposed to get worked up. Unless it's on certain things that you're supposed to get worked up over and at the right times. But to get worked up about things that are not on the script to do, or to do it at what's considered an inappropriate time, generally considered problematic. So, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and the flip side to that, I think, is that you find, when looking through history, that a lot of the greatest contributions have been made by people who sort of been weighed upon by the system,
yes.
and their nets has been sort of crushed in to this like super strong form that's
Absolutely.
just like super concentrated.
Very good point. That's basically the first of the three options that I didn't talk much about. But you're right, that is a huge opportunity, and that's what we're all going for here. Is you can turn it. If you can figure out how to get past it, it's basically XP. But you basically you're born, if you're in a hard environment, buried under nuggets like Super Mario, and you now have to smash all the nuggets to get out. In the process of doing that, you're going to get tons of coin. But you basically have to smash and get coin or get buried by them. There's no other option. But you're right, if you can get out, then generally the comedic ability, the artistic ability, the scientific ability, the cause advocating ability tends to be like off the chain. Oh, real quick, the other option, the third option, which has to be watched out for, is the kind of acting out. And that's the thing, people having good social alchemy, I think, can help people from acting out. Because you kind of see it like Naked Afraid. Everyone, even the ones that are like strong and mentally squared away, when you start getting really hungry and bitten by bugs for like 2 weeks straight, everyone's got some, some fracture lines in them. There's no human that doesn't start to actually kind of show their, their buttocks a little bit after like, 2 to 3 weeks of just being oppressed on by the environment. Mm-hmm. So the same thing happened for the Nez. What it tends to do is it kind of like goes off script, almost like habitually. You'll see some comedians are like that. Some comedians that they're really cool, going on Bruno was saying, where they're able to be very like human, then real funny, switch back and forth at ease, and it's like crazy impressive, and it comes from that difficult light they had to navigate with their powers, and that's how they got to that stage. But there's other ones where sometimes the interviewer's trying to engage with them in a friendly way. I give like two examples that can be like this sometimes. One would be Russell Brand in the irreverent way, and the other one in more like the Najee ways, like Robin Williams, mm-hmm. where they kind of won't work with the other person, even like if the host is really cool. Do you mean like the other people on the couch are cool and the host is cool and they're trying to give them conversations they want to talk about and they're trying to laugh at all the jokes that they make, but still have like something resembling a real conversation there as well, which should be reasonable. But they're like, no, it's Robin Williams' monologue from start to finish. No one else needs to be involved. Russell Brand, I don't care what you thought you're talking about. I'm going to just jump and do backflips into wherever off everything you say. Everything you say, backflip, guaranteed. That's what's going to happen tonight. Backflip on backflip on backflip.
Totally. I remember like.
I imagine for people, myself, even as a Nye Alpha, I was a Nez Alpha, that would become annoying after a while. Do you know what I mean? Hmm. And I think Robin Williams and Russell Brand are awesome and brilliant, so I brought them up.
Yeah, like you're trying to actually get somewhere, and it's just like it isn't going anywhere because of that. Because every single time you speak, that happens.
Yeah.
So
it's a disruption, yeah. Some kind.
So even it's fun.
But it is interesting.
It is interesting, but
yeah.
You can't have this disruption on disruption on disruption.
Yeah.
That's Nez gone crazy. Okay. I'm curious, do you guys have any experience with that? For myself, obviously.
I really highlight to the classroom thing. Like throughout my entire school life, disruptions would, I would always be like onto the disruptions that would actually happen in the room, and I'm very familiar with classes, the teacher trying to get somewhere with a class, but continually gets, there's a disruption somewhere. She gets taken off track, and I notice that happens a lot, especially if the teacher, is, it seems like they're interpretive or they're like a ninja or something. They're more likely to actually go on like a tangent that's unrelated to the actual classroom discussion about I don't know, rectangles or something, and I would always want to help kind of extend that as long as I could, help fuel the fire of having things go off track, whenever there's a disruption, my Nye is kind of it's my cue to kind of maybe I should go somewhere with this, maybe I should say something that kind of keeps us going or kind of builds on this, so
it's cool.
Kind of cool.
Oh, please go, Glenn. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. I want to let Bruno speak too and everything. But I just had like two examples of like certain situations. First is like friends. Sometimes you know that one friend maybe that you might have or have had who like you're talking to and they always try to like make some kind of crude joke about something and it's like like it's like so yeah I went over there and I did this thing and I dug a hole and it's like that's what she said and then it's like it's kind of at a certain point it's a little bit of
Early on, I'm like, no, that's annoying.
yeah, that is annoying, and it's just sort of like, you're giving me, like you're really messing me up right now. So that's like one example that I was coming up with. But another one is sort of like this is
that's kind of low level, kind of ugly way of just
I think it also depends on like how good the humor is. Like if it's bad humor, I'm not gonna like be as interested in it,
Yeah, it's kind of annoying when it's done like poorly in that way, but it can be more better.
Yeah,
but,
and for the record, I think during certain situations, like saying that's what she says is actually funny, but it just depends,
Yeah, it depends, but yeah, I kind of don't really like that joke personally. It just kind of like annoys me.
Yeah, I tend to not like it either, but it's like I want to keep an open mind. I don't know.
Right? I think if we don't get bogged down in specifics, I don't actually like that joke in particular. But I think if you just go with basically the general idea of like low crass humor,
It's like the lowest hanging of the lowest hanging of the lowest hanging fruit. It's like it's always there. If that's what you're always going for, then you must not be able to reach the higher fruit.
But there's two things that are interesting. That's absolutely true, which is why we generally have a low opinion of it. But with that said, if you were to to ask me to like Zai this really sharp, and I guess you do the same with your Z, Bruno, sometimes, I guess for me the example I'd use is like Beavis and Butthead. To me, not the funniest show. Kids in class used to imitate Beavis and Butthead, also, to me, not the funniest. But it would make stuck-up teachers get interrupted, and that was just funny as shit. So I would have used a better joke.
Yeah, like the context of the situation can make.
Like I'll give you the point. The joke was dumb, but for the disruption, I'll give you a point for that.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's what I was just saying. Like in certain situations, like even like really low crude humor can be funny if it, like depending on the situation. Like if you use it like in a way that kind of disrupts something, or it takes someone off track. Like the context can sometimes.
This gets back to ego too. There's also like a nerviness to it. It's like going back to like Beavis and Butthead joke, which again is not necessarily the most high level, but if a person did this to a Stuffy teacher, I'd give a point just because Stuffy is not cool. But then if they did it to a powerful Stuffy teacher, I'd give them extra points for that. Again, joke was stupid, but the fact that you disrupted this boring ongoings, I'll give you a point for that. But you did it to a person that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
I will give you extra points for that. I'm still working that joke though. But I think Nez just kind of like, 'cause I respect that from Nye or Nee. Just the fact that they'll just say something nerdy like that. You know what I mean? And they'll disrupt something like on a person that's going to give them like, oh, no, you didn't. You're like, yeah, I did.
It kind of makes you feel like, oh my gosh, you can just hear like everyone in the classroom like, oh, everyone kind of, it's like shit's about to go down. It's like now the class is like, now we have something to talk about. Now it's like everyone's interested. Before everyone's like,
You brought one other too. Is it brought in the excitement of like what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's more exciting now. It's more exciting. In fact, like, sometimes it sounds weird. I think both Nye and Nee will do this in different ways because I've seen both of them do it.
I think there's like a phenomenon of like trying to like playing with the teacher's anger that you're like not staying in line. Like like you'll say things like that, like Beavis Butthead jokes, like just even if it's like crude or whatever, it's funny because it just tends to throw them off, and it makes them frustrated you're not staying in line, and it just goes against the system. I don't know. It's cool.
Sure. As a part of that, it can be the anger, but I think it's actually under like a larger umbrella of the rules and the power the rules have.
Yeah, like where the anger is actually coming from, right?
Right. Because even if it's like just a person not necessarily getting angry, maybe they just kind of like wig out or something. But if you make a teacher wig out or authority figure wig out, I think Nez is just interested. What happens? The teacher says sit down, everyone sits down, but this person made a second joke. Everyone's no, what happens now? What happens if you make a joke after the teacher said don't make a joke? He's going to the principal, he's dead now. He made a joke going down the hall. He's making a joke in the principal's office. What happens? You see some movies, they bring the parents in. Dun dun dun. He makes a joke when the parents are there. Parents beat him or ground him or whatever, makes jokes about that. You're like, stop doing that. And so I think there's actually like an empowering quality that you can do that obviously can get you in a lot of trouble. But Nez, I think, feels empowered that when are you allowed to break the rules? When can you break them? Because I want to do it as much as you can and get away with. Not allowed to, get away with. You know what I mean? That's naturally the KG quality, which is why it has to be, linked to other powers like strategy and morality and all those other kind of things. But Nate, please, go ahead.
And another one, which is originality, which is if you're just the guy that's always making jokes, that gets old fast.
Yeah.
After a certain point.
Sure.
You don't want to be known as just, that's the person that cracks a joke all the time. It has to be done in a very kind of like interesting, compelling,
right.
like original kind of way. Not just like.
I'll say.
I think if like you can be like the comedian, but like you got to be original. You can't do the same stuff over and over again. You got to have new material, right?
You have to be interesting. You have to. I think you have to show a cleverness, a kind of genius, and then I think the other thing is nerve. Basically, you need to show some genius and you need to show some nerve. Both those things, I think, give you a lot of credit.
Yeah. When you say nerve, Coach, do you mean like code? Like there's some things that you can joke about, and then there's some things that are maybe.
No, what I'm saying about nerve is that obviously there are some boundaries. Some
Yeah.
But
exactly.
Now is I'm actually talking about the transgressive element. Whereas when people actually go to see the comedians, generally, no matter who they are, they have strongly developed Nez, and there's two kinds of parts about the fix they're getting. One is, you mentioned, the trip. Like, do it. Turn me upside down. Disrupt my brain waves. But as a part of that, the spell generally required to disrupt the planned programming brainwaves generally is something where you're like, oh, he/she or whatever did not actually just say that. And both Nye and Nee like to say or do. It doesn't even be said. A lot of Nee, for example, little things they kind of like will do like naughty things on stage, and you can't believe they're doing that. They're actually being lewd, for example. It's a very classic one they'll do, and you're like, are you allowed to do that? And everyone's like, I think Nez likes when people see what it's doing and then look around of like, are you allowed to do that? I don't know. It's like a rush. It's a rush that you're doing something that makes everyone go, can you get away with that?
It's like, oh my gosh, where's the authority?
Somebody's gonna call the police or something.
One thing I've noticed with, I think, Nee Jai is they have an interesting kind of way. I think both Nez Alpha, or all Nez Alpha, I mean, are very good at like evading important questions sometimes, or just questions in general, like that they might find boring or they might find like it's too detailed or something like that. In that, like, if you ask somebody like a question, like they're Nez Alpha or like they're like a Nee Jai, for example, they might be like, oh, and so did you talk to whatever so and such about this other thing? It's like, I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about this thing over here. Like, pay attention, And it's kind of like it's really, I guess it's good if it's done properly. It can sort of like distract the person, kind of be like, I'm gonna play this magic trick and get you to change some subjects. But other times it's sort of like, well, no, we really need to know the answers to these questions because it's kind of like really important. So it's not okay for you to just like evade the question every single time it's being asked. At some point, it needs to be addressed. So I kind of like, I notice that sometimes. It's the good and the bad of it right now.
But both the Nez powers will do that. What you're basically talking about, we were talking about like proactively disrupting the planned programming. What you're talking about is defensively doing it. So, proactively, kind of like you make a joke and that does it, but you choose to. But then they could like be looking right at you and like, I'm going to do some planned programming on you. I'm going to ask you some certain questions. You're going to give me information on these certain questions, and that's how this is going to go. And Nez is like, oh, I don't know about that. Catch me if you can. Or any more experiences? I'm curious.
I think Bruno still has to go. If he
Yes.
has any ideas with that, that's.
You shared somewhere at school. I was curious, any other kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, personally, it sort of like shaped my development a lot because it sort of taught me that, you know, this isn't how the world works. Like, you can't, like, it basically taught me that, like, if I want to do the most interesting things, whatever they might be, and it turned out to be music, but I didn't really realize that for a long time. Like, until my mid-teens, I didn't really realize that that's what I was most interested in and would be. I mean, I'd always liked music, but I never tried doing anything with it until I was about 14 or 15. But even so, way before then, I just sort of realized that I sort of had to do the secret agent thing. And it sort of goes with the topic that has been a lot on my mind since you've reread me as an Ijai, which is that I spent most of my life sort of trying to be an IG or something along those lines that I pictured. And it sort of ties into a lot of these topics that we're bringing up, but the whole secret agent thing, using Z and Vi to like pretend, you know, cover up.
Right.
So I've always sort of felt a kinship with a lot of like historical figures for that purpose, for that reason, who for whatever reason, both Naiji and Nijai have had to sort of operate in subterfuge, I guess. And even before I realized why I was doing it, I've always just sort of felt that sort of kinship, and just by coincidence or for whatever reason, those turned out to be some of the most influential figures. So it hasn't been entirely a bad thing. It's just been something that I've had to work around. It's caused me a lot of problems in life. It's basically like it's caused me to try to cage my knee and put it first. At first, it caused me to try to put it into a Vi context when I was very young. But then, as I grew older, I sort of started seeing that Nai, and I didn't have words for this kind of thing. I just saw it from like, okay, so this person's successful, this person's had a major impact, and such and for whatever reason, and obviously a lot of them were Naiji, especially for males. So it was just a lot easier for me to sort of try to push that, and it caused me, I think, throughout my life to sort of overdo my others Nai. Like it forced me to, like the thing that you're talking about being like too disruptive. I've definitely had that problem a lot because I was just sort of overcompensating for not having that knee available. I didn't have the knee, so I was like.
Oh, where'd Bruno go?
Oh, I think he froze.
Nope. That was really that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Toxical.
Welcome back.
I love how it froze like right in that pose too. He's like
Yeah.
speaking, raising his hand.
I'm about to say something really important.
I'll say one thing while he's there is that having been in an environment both in my family, but also just a lot of the activities I did, like martial arts things I did years ago. But those environments are heavily directive and often a lot of times Nai. So I'll talk about Nai at this point, although there are other directives there as well. But also just in general, during games I played and a lot of things, there was just a lot of say Nai around. And one thing that can happen is it can shut out the other Nez power. And ironically, you can actually have it where the Nez powers don't actually realize that the other one can put them at ease. Like they're actually worried. Do you know what I mean? Like Nai, when it's around only itself all the time, it gets too control freaky. Do you know what I mean? It needs to actually have adaptive powers, and so forth, in order to not be overly control freaky. So. Oh, and I guess where it came from is Bruno's saying about his knee was being suppressed, so he kind of like wanted to break out. I felt that in the reverse for my other. Like that she wanted to have conversations with me, and the environment, the amount of Nye in it, even though Nye is also interpretive, it was just so Nye saturated, a lot of these environments, like oversaturated, that she just couldn't breathe. Her knee couldn't breathe there. And so that made me disrupt, although I often went the route of just like, you look away from me for a second, like, ninja! That was like, no, you know what I mean? Like, I would just disappear all the time. That was the way I just dealt with that. Like, yeah, this place is not for me, see ya. And so I was very elusive in that regard. But that actually had a lot to do with wanting to find some place that the knee could breathe and I could talk to it. But it can feel cramped in that way. I guess we can go ahead and talk about, till Bruno comes back, maybe that topic about Maya and Katie were referencing about heredity. Do you guys want to go ahead and just take lead on that, and I can add some thoughts on the end?
She was asking about how there's a 99.9% probability of same-sex parents being the same mojo, I believe, as their kids, same-sex kids. I think on that there's a few possibilities for why that might happen. One thing that one thing is that if there was cheating going on, like if the mom had sex with a different dad, then obviously you could end up with a different male child, different mojo. Another thing is that there might be a misread, possibly.
But I don't think that would account for what she's saying, because she's asking basically how does variation.
Oh, is she asking? She's asking why there's variation there.
She's asking where the little variation comes from.
Oh yeah, I thought that helped partially explain it. There's a possibility of it being misread. There's possibility of cheating. There's possibility. What others are there, Coach?
But I guess because there's two things there. There's a question of the percentage that's there, like contextually in the here and now, and which a misread could, I guess, account for that. Yes, but I think it seems like her inquiry is on a larger scale of like, where would variation from same-sex gender family members get variation from? And I think, as I think was mentioned there, I think there would be the mutation. There is, and I actually think the random mutation is the one that is going to have to be the top for this reason. The human species all around the world has the full allotment of mojos. We haven't seen anywhere where they don't have a spread, the same spread. So if there's not random mutation, that wouldn't be possible because the world's tribes throughout history have been devastated over and over again to where their numbers had dropped beneath 10,000, beneath 1,000, beneath 200. And yet from this...
Yeah, I mean, we had to get here somehow.
Right.
We don't know exactly what's happening currently for sure, though, do we?
No, but that's what I'm saying. So I'm going Occam's razor of like...
That there's a very good chance that perhaps that's the highest probability, is what you're saying, Coach?
I'm saying that element must be there as a constant. So even if there's no cheating and there's no mojo reading errors, there will always be, I think, some variation at a very high data pool level from random mutation. And the reason I would say that would be Occam's razor. I don't know this, but it seems to me the natural disasters that are out there in the world have shrunken tribes of humanity over and over and over again to where they would not, if you think about it, have had a full allotment of mojo.
That makes a lot more sense. And
yet they keep going back. Once a tribe gets big enough, you just always seem to end up having all the mojo.
And there needs to be like, I'm guessing that's also just to help keep things balanced for other reasons as well. Like if there's a higher rate of if there's a higher rate of one mojo like not having kids or something for some reason, like maybe that's there's like I guess there's a random element that favors that mojo, quote unquote random. So it keeps the tribe of humanity balanced, possibly.
It seems very coincidental in a way. Like if you have like just always Naiji male, Nijai female, to have that like randomness incorporated from mutation, it helps to always keep the, and it's not necessarily mutation in terms of mojo. There's always just mutations that are always going on that have to make humans more evolved in some capacity, in some kind of like physical form. So that's always has to be there in order to always keep pushing the species further and further and evolving further and further. And so it's just coincidental that the mojo thing is also part of the DNA, which I believe, and that can be, altered every now and then. And it's a good just sort of like you have that because and that like helps to make sure that by the nature of it.
It's also good to have rare.
Yeah.
And to me, like if I was to design a species that had like mojo specialists, I would design it that they tend to almost always have the same-sex gender family members through procreation, and also generally tend to match up storylines when mates, although it's not exactly, but there's a high magnetic pull. But it is good that you can mate with any mojo, and it's good that on a large volume size, I forget someone quoted a number in there where it like switches that. It's probably a metric of that size, where after a massive amount of, like I said, 99.9% of the time it's going to be the same sex as the parent. But it's good that, every like 1 in 1,000 or whatever, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 100,000, that it would switch up. That way the specialist programming that we evolved with wouldn't shut down.
Oh shit! I wonder if the probability of being a different mojo than your same-sex parent goes up if a generation ago, like your grandparents, like were that mojo. Like if you had like a great grandfather,
Right.
Oh, except that would change it, but.
No, I'm saying that. That's a good point. Like I think that we could. I think on the size scale we're talking about, it would have to be like multiple.
Like there might be somewhere in your family line that like favors that mojo for some reason, and then you become that, like as kind of like if you didn't become the same-sex parent, you would most likely become that one, right? Is what I'm thinking. There's like some math to that possibly.
So there's two things you brought there, Ben. I think really good. One is, we're basically talking about, are there some genetic lines of humans that are built in where they have a higher degree of mutability?
Mm-hmm.
But even high means it only happens after many generations. But compared to other legacy lines, they do tend to mutate more. So that's one interesting thing. Then the other one you're bringing up is that if a person does have that propensity to be one of the very rare mutating ones, does it just randomly mutate into anything, or like if you do like tip over into mutating, is there like, oh, you go from Ni Z to Z Ni, or like what is there like some sort of mathematical most likely mutation?
Yeah, there's like certain mojos that you're more likely to mutate into, or like have your offspring mutate into, depending on circumstances falling in alignment to allow that to happen.
Right.
Basically. And yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to want to research and kind of get into. I think a lot of the popular scientists and all that sort of stuff, they'll get into that and like try to figure that out.
First thing, there'll need to be a clean. Obviously, we have to do the Rosetta Stone for the celebrity, but then we need to get pod layer practitioners of another Rosetta Stone, so they would be willing to act as a Rosetta Stone for scientists. The Rosetta Stone we're doing now will act as a Rosetta Stone for mojo readers, but we'd like to have a Rosetta Stone of data samples, like so you could actually take, all the remote gender mojos and then, test their DNA and see what's similar or different based on the categorizations that we would kind of provide for them. That'd be fascinating.
Yeah.
And then what you're talking about there, Glenn, is then from that, hope they could find some sort of genetic codes that they can, and then figure out of those which ones are the ones that could make a mutation happen. How does that occur? But I do think this sounds like that sounds like a fascinating course of study.
Certainly does. Lots of Zez, but definitely very interesting.
Yeah. Sure. And we had to get a lot of actually groundbreaking Vez in place. Well, like I said, we'll need to get a virtual a Rosetta Stone for celebrities that people can watch, but then we'll need like tangible Rosetta Stone of pilot practitioners that we can draw blood from and get urine samples from.
I'm gonna need you to do something.
You can't test DNA off a video. You know what you read off video, but you can't test DNA off video. Not as far as I know.
I'll pluck a hair off my beard and we can use that, but you're not getting anything else.
Take a swab and put it in your mouth and your sheet.
Okay, so you'll need a Rosetta Stone of people, 32 gender mojos, 1,000 each, who will allow you to do a hair analysis.
Just a question, Coach. But as far as the Rosetta Stone that we have so far, how many anomalies are there so far that we've noted? I know that there is this one family of
I haven't checked that recently, but I believe it's like maybe 2 each, 2 sister groups and 2 guy groups, maybe that or one. I know one of the males is maybe the only one, but I know it's the Quades, but that can be explained away obviously by infidelity. But
really?
Why did it say it happened? Oh, I didn't say it happened. No. I'm sorry, Quaid family. I'm not saying that, but as a scientist, I have to just throw out there that
that's a possibility.
That could be explained away in that manner. Obviously, as Ben noticed, it could be a misread. I could misread them, but I keep looking at them and they don't look alike at all.
Yeah, and I don't.
Dennis Quaid and Randy Quaid look really different. Like
I don't
CGI different.
Like that they're that it's like really that likely. Just like just like perhaps a really small possibility that's on the board.
So
I think their mom.
I'm Quaid family to know we're not actually making any mojo journalism story here in any regard. We're just kind of sighing and seeing like, okay, flowchart here. We have to mention,
given how often it probably occurs, it almost seems surprising that it's only those 2 that have shown up so prominently. Yeah. I mean, given that how many people we have, it's just like 32,000.
So I believe the mutation would happen at a very high volume level.
So we have like 15,000.
Is it 99.9% or is it 99.99%?
I don't know what that actually is. I know this. However many family members we have in the virtual village right now, they're all the same mojo, the same sex, except for I think 1 or 2 sets of brothers and 1 or 2 sets of sisters. That's basically it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sisters I believe is the one with the nice Z female family, and then there's the one child that happened to become a Zyme.
Not sure. That's good. We should probably look that up.
Oh man, I'm
kind of on a kick of clearing out my psyche, and then I want to clear out bubbles. But then you're right. I do want to come and start looking for anomalies or sort of trace patterns.
Yeah, like for example, Ron Paul is one that I put in the review.
Yes, Ron Paul. That's the other one. That's our father-son duo. And just I'll look into that. But on that one, just be honest, it is what it is. But the most likely answer is that from what I've seen the data, most likely answer is that I got it wrong. It doesn't mean I did get it wrong, but objectively speaking, it's that rare. The next option, and I'm just being a scientist here, I'm not saying there was infidelity. However, it must be noted that infidelity there's apparently a lot of infidelity in the world. I don't know if people know that, but there's a lot of infidelity.
Yeah.
Non-same-sex, different mojos between same-sex family members is really, really, really rare. So infidelity rates versus mutation rates, I'm going to say it's more likely infidelity. But then it could in fact be mutation. It could be mutation. But most likely, honestly, is that I probably got it wrong. But I'll look in to see what happened. Because I know, they both look Vi Alpha, but you got to figure out exactly.
Yeah, I just said okay, out of these 2, Rand Paul definitely looks like a Vi G to me. I'm not as sure about Ron Paul. That's Yeah,
I'm kind of holding off on that because I'm gonna get to it, but I would like to actually get a little bit my head into the Vi Alpha, and right now the music I'm not really dealing with them much at all, so my lens is really dialed into some certain mojos, which is good. So it helps me breathe them better and faster. But I'd actually like to get my politics brain on before I take on.
And it's actually pretty relevant, like when you're out in the field, because like the 2016 election is going to be next year, so people are going to be talking about politics with you probably at some point.
To be honest, in all the conversations that I've had talking to people in the street and with the baristas,
you haven't had a conversation like that yet?
And to be honest, until it became relevant as a possible Marissa Reed, we don't really talk about it that much.
Yeah, that's true.
And we're pretty into pop culture in all areas. So yeah, I definitely do plan to get it. I don't want to minimize its importance, but I did want to state that you go through phases where you're focusing on certain things more, and then you're better at that kind of reading.
Oh yeah, totally. I relate to that.
And so when you address a case that maybe, for example, an anomaly, that automatically means it's going to be challenging. I want to really be able to look good at it. For example, like Bruno, his case, what really helped with that is I've just been the last several months, actually like year or so, I've been working with a lot of music samples. And I've been going through and I've been telling the difference between Naiji and Nijai for a while now, and I'm kind of like really in the zone on that. And that's what made that so feasible. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just say that with Rand Paul, because I know when we were doing politics, kind of get really good at telling. Actually, anytime you get those power bubbles where it's the double bi alpha and the Xeni, you kind of get really good at telling those three apart. You see those three all the time.
Yeah, that's so fun. Yeah.
By the way, the female group, the family, I think you were asking about this, Coach. It's the Lee Curtis family, right? I believe it's the Janet Lee. Yeah.
Is this Jamie Lee Curtis?
Jamie Lee Curtis, yes.
Cool. Thank you.
So that's the Zaini that was in the family of Nizai or Nizai.
Not sure, but yeah, she's different. I think. Yeah, I think the mom looks like a Nizai. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for jogging. Yeah, that jogs memory. Thank you very much. Yeah. Jamie Lee Curtis still looks Zaini to me, and the mom has the more square, classic Nizai looking face. That's the case I'm thinking of. So I will look. But that could be a case of just random mutation. But if it is, I believe it's the
yeah. Like in that case, infidelity isn't possible.
So like I say, so if you want to get like really strict here, we kind of have like one case, this case where I believe it's a Nizai mother and a Zaini daughter, that I really don't have another explanation that's possible. I could be misreading. I'll keep looking back to that. But right now, I really don't think I am.
Maybe that's random mutation. We have enough samples. One of them, if it is like currently happening, that's
Sure.
Well, I don't know if you know this, Coach, but I put up another video of this one other dude. It's Jack Quaid. I think his father is, I think it's the Genii of the Quaid brothers. And so it's, I don't know, that might, I think he might be Genii as well, but it's just quite interesting to see the son of one of the Quaid brothers, and if his depending on what his mojo is, that might be able to, I don't know, be an interesting kind of like new data point to sort of like incorporate. So yeah.
And there's a rumor about, I mean, obviously this is a rumor, so we can't say, but it's something that would make sense if they didn't want to make it public. But apparently Jamie Lee Curtis and her sister Kelly Lee are rumored to have some sort of androgen insensitivity syndrome, meaning that they would actually be genetically male, but expressed as female because they can't react to the androgens.
Really?
Yeah, it's something that happens every now and then, but it looked like the person ends up.
Thank you.
Am I frozen?
No.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of like freezing from you guys, but as long as you guys can hear me fine. Yeah. So what basically happens is that they're genetically male, but physically and in every like superficial way they're female.
Whoa.
And that what this. Yeah.
Yeah, that rumor's been around for a long time.
That's really fascinating because that could explain it.
That would mean that she takes after the father's mojo, obviously.
Yeah.
And she just in every way superficially she is actually a woman, but genetically she's following the mojo of the father.
Oh, that's so
That
crazy.
that is so cool.
And that condition is not that rare. That happens like one every maybe. I'm just gonna throw out a number like 10,000, 20,000. Like it's not that rare.
Okay, so that could explain how you get these other mojos shifting across. They could be through the genders. That's one way. Now
That only happens in that direction.
You take back mojos you didn't have, but it would give you, if you started with, say, a Nizai female and a Zaini male, through that mutation, which you say is not that rare, over time you could get the other side. You could actually get the Nizai male and the Zaini female. Now, it doesn't explain mutating the rest of the tribe. but
These people,
that's cool.
can you guys hear me?
Oh,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
I can hear
Sorry,
you.
it just froze for a second. It happens about 2 to 5 times every 100,000, so it's once every 50,000 or maybe a little more.
Gotcha.
But they're generally sterile, from what I understand, and it only happens in that direction, meaning that genetically male, genetically male, but phenotypically female. So they're actually, I don't think they're genetically capable of reproducing, or
It's
it,
cool.
but yeah,
That
it's,
is so cool.
it's really, I mean, we may very well have met somebody like this in the past, and just they may not even know that this is the case for them because they just wouldn't know unless they had a genetic test. And there's other differences.
Can that go either way, male to female?
No, that particular thing only works in that direction.
What?
Genetically male, but appearing female.
So that in no way could explain the Quaid situation.
No, not really.
Okay.
Hold on, but then there's also another one which was kind of like my memory was jogged on this. It has to do with Sonny and Cher. They're what do you call it? Their offspring. They're one of their
She's
kids.
on red. That's so trippy.
That one is like really.
That's very hard, but I do believe. But that's what very challenging because the weight and the unhappiness and a bunch of other stuff. But I think it looked like a Nijai. But I need to be really strong to read that. I'm putting that one on the back burner.
Yeah. So maybe that might be an explanation, though. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, that definitely could be because there's other that's the androgen insensitive syndrome is one extreme. There's many other things in between that could result in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean that's just like one of many things that happens where like on the surface it looks like one thing, and am I frozen for you guys?
No, we're listening.
Okay, cool. But yeah, it basically only works that way because, in the womb when we're first conceived, actually everybody's first conceived as female, genetically, and then there's hormones that are pumped into the womb that turn us into males, but by default everyone's female.
Right.
Like when they're first conceived. So that's why it doesn't work the other way that you're suggesting, like where it would be outwardly male but genetically female.
But it does make me have an idea. It's just an idea. What that principle you're talking about to me seems like it introduces the idea of a larger principle that's enacted there but would apply other places, which is kind of having a template and then infusing it with chemicals, hormones, to finish up the baking process. So I'm wondering if perhaps in general, maybe you are in more of a general template form at the very beginning, and then the hormones that you are given because that's what the DNA says to do kind of brew an embryo into their mojo. And if something was to mess with that chemical infusion process, some ink jets are going where they don't normally go. You know what I mean? Some chemical ink jets in the beginning there. Maybe you could take a template from a certain womb and bake another mojo. I don't know. But that concept you said of like, basically we come as a template female and that are infused with chemicals to grow the template into something else, male. I'm just trying to say as a general principle then, could there be other ways where genetically we're like a template and then you're infused, you know what I mean, with the cocktail to kind of...
Yeah, it's like that's how you get your mojos.
Right. like the DNA has that plan, but if something, because these were like genetic defects come in, or genetic, ailments, for example, mutations. So that is your mojo if you think about it. I mean, that would still make it your mojo because the DNA, that's on the script. The script has that plan, so that is you. It's the program that's going to tell the inkjets and the printer what to make. But if the program, that's where genetic defects come in, if the programming was to be off, then the inkjets might actually express something else than what was planned. And I guess obviously a lot of times that can be a whole range of, you mentioned one there, Bruno, but there's obviously a total ton of genetic defects, different ones based on how the the DNA script did not translate as it was intended to into the physical form. You know what I mean? Somewhere between the programming and the 3D printing, something went off there. But I mean, if that can happen, I mean, it does make you wonder how that. It seems like it would have a high. I don't know. I would think that would affect Mojo somehow. If nothing more than this, I think it would affect your riff maybe. Like you got a different chemical cocktail. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Than what's planned.
Yeah. This brings up a lot of different things. One of the things,
like your riff is partially based on your genetics.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. I mean that makes sense.
Yeah, not the other kind of riffs, but that was kind of like basic physiological riffs.
Yeah.
But then that brings the question, like you have like mutation. There's like the question of mutational defect versus it's just a mutation. Like, you know what I mean? Would that be necessarily because not all?
I mean, like even like
a lot of them are just interesting or can be cool.
Like even like a lot of your talent, like that sort of pushes you a certain way in life. That's also genetic. So
yeah.
To a certain extent, that would also be there. I mean, obviously, there's a huge amount that's nurture, but
yeah, there's a lot of stories that you hear in the news, like two twins that were like separated from a long time ago, and then they grew up basically to be exactly the same in terms of like their life and everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting how that works.
Yeah.
But this brings up another interesting idea. It's kind of a bit depressing, but lobotomy. What does that do to your mojo, if that does anything at all? I would think that it doesn't do anything.
I don't think it would do anything. I think most likely that's the question is going to be. I mean, it obviously can do a lot, but I don't think it's going to do anything as far as changing your mojo. But I think obviously it's going to have a great effect on the operational capacity of your peak pathway. So sawing a Stradivarius in half does not make it stop being a violin, but it does make a sawed in half violin, which probably doesn't play like a violin's supposed to play.
Yeah.
Although the brain's ability to work around is amazing, but if you damage it too much, there's
obviously. That's really interesting. I have to thank Bruno for bringing that all up. That's really.
Yeah.
I would never have gotten this information if it wasn't for some crazy me coming in and just being like, hey, check this out.
That was great research. Thank you. And on quick too. We need to sign off here in a little bit, so I don't know if we have a time to get into that question about how our others kind of freak us out in good and bad ways. That's going to be kind of meaty. We should do it next time. I'd actually prefer to have more of the crew here because I think
it's a really good
Sure.
discussion.
Sure.
But yeah, before Bruno, he was talking about something, and then he got cut off because of his connection.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, we can maybe go over that now.
Yeah, that'd be great because we got like 15 minutes left.
Okay, so yeah, Bruno, there was just something that you.
Yeah, I'm continuing to get freezes. Like you guys will periodically freeze. That's why it looks like I'm not responding because the screen is frozen. But I have been able to catch everything you guys have been saying. I think.
Cool.
Because it'll only freeze for like 5 seconds or so.
Gotcha. But Glenn was asking about when you were off. Before.
I did hear that. Yeah.
Okay.
I did hear. What I was saying is that I've had to because the knee, like my natural form of knee is like it's like it thrives on like pushing on like pressure points and like trying to like find cracks in the system and things like that. it hasn't been received very well, like in the school system, in my family, even with like my group of friends. Like there was always like when we were hanging out, there was always a point where they'd be like, they would say something to me like, "You need to settle down," and I mean, I had other friends that were worse. Like I remember like this other friend in particular who was probably an Ijai who was just always getting in trouble, and we would always be like, "Man, that dude's got to settle down," and that wasn't me. But still, but he was more like that in a physical way. He would always be acting out like that and like, I don't know, breaking things and like causing problems that way. But the kind of need that I had was much more like conceptual. So I would always be like asking people way too many questions,
Right.
and like my friends would always be like, we get even friends that I think looking back were probably Adram, Nijai, and Jaini, and some Naiji as well. They would just be like, you gotta, that's not what we're talking about, and like that's and so I've always sort of been sort of hemmed in like not on purpose, not maliciously, I don't think. Although when I did get older, just the older I get, it felt like especially other Nijai males that I would come into contact with. Looking back, that's what I think I was seeing is like other Nijai who got really good at like caging their knee and putting it into vai.
Right.
They'd get really uncomfortable like being around my knee, like especially as we got older, and so that it sort of like really pushed me into a corner and really drove me to like get extremely Z and vied up in such a way that like my knee, it basically would compartmentalize my life in such a way that when I was alone in my room, my knee would just go crazy and just like literally start bouncing off the walls and smashing things. But then when I'd go outside, I'd have to like lock it all down and then keep it all like held together, and that just caused like so many problems in my life, in terms of like just almost everything. That the one good thing that came out of it is just like I was saying, it caused me to really closely identify with figures that have had to go through this kind of thing, and I guess maybe not surprisingly, some of the most influential people in music in particular for me, but as an Nijai, I tend to look at everything in general, and want to learn from the people that have made the most interesting contributions. So a lot of them, looking at their biographies, they went through like sort of like several states, lots of like fractured relationships and things like that throughout their lives, and it sort of gives me comfort in that level that I can understand that. But yeah, it's been a hell of a road to get to where I can like accept my knee, not just accept it, but like let it loose so that it doesn't have this kind of like kinetic violence to it where it's just like once a year it gets to like thrash about, and it thrashes about so violently that it breaks everything, and then the rest of the time it's like locked up. And that's how I've been for most of my life since I basically started. It just got worse and worse as you got older, like because I mean I guess you can see that with Naiji, like Naiji to Naiji going head to head, V'd up Naiji trying to squash or cage up the Nai, but there's a parallel similar thing that goes on with V'd up.
Those are the V'd up ones. The Zai ones try to trap it up, and the V'd up Nachi try to like just distract.
Exactly.
Between the way you Z to control and the way you Vi to control your momentum.
Yeah. I mean, I ran into both Z'd up and V'd up Nijai, and actually, in a way, the V'd up ones are even more. Well, I don't know, but I ran into a lot of that. Especially the older I got, like the more pronounced it became with others, and like so the more like of that kind. Because Z and the thing about Zai and V is that like they're in service of very like domineering and controlling powers, the Nai and the Ji, but the Z and the Vi themselves are by nature very controlling and domineering. So when that would come out, it would just, from other Nijai in my surroundings, it would just especially Nijai males, that it would just come out as just like this violence, and I was just like, what the fuck? Is this how I'm supposed to react? Is this how I'm supposed to be? Um,
Now, was there? You said like once a year or every so often it would build. Did you, when it happened, was there something going on in your life, or was there triggers of a moment that kind of like make the energy?
it was all there's a common pattern to it. Self-contained, meaning it's all I was alone in my room. Um, Always involving media, involving some sort of discovery that I'd have with media. Like I'd find a new way to combine media, and then I would just go nuts about it. And I would start trying to contact everyone that I knew and just like start shoving it down people's throats, being like, listen to this kind of need that I figured out. Like I know you haven't heard from me in like whatever long, or like maybe you don't even know who I am, you know. But listen, and so. It really became that kind of pattern. Like I would just shut myself in, and I'm comfortable doing that. Like I'm still to this day like very reclusive Nijai, and I think that's just part of who I am.
That's not a common. Like I said, the Nijai are the most reclusive Objective Mojo by far.
Yeah, I mean I like the past couple of years, like literally the past year or two, I've left the house for no other reason than to occasionally go grocery shopping or like go get some food somewhere, like, or maybe some other little gadget that I need. I haven't once left the house to go do something for fun, to go do something with like people where people are gathering just for fun. I'm not drawn to that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a musician, but I hate going to concerts. Yeah. It just feels like such an overpowering.
I'm glad someone else feels that, because myself always, over the years, people are always like, you really like music? Like, yeah, and they start talking about concerts. I'm like, yeah, I love music, but I don't do concerts.
No, like
I know, same, so same.
I think like I might,
Yeah.
like, if there was a band I was really into, like for one night, like at one, like very, very rarely, you know, I might just, you know, I want to experience, like I might just, I'll take my V and like I really want to experience that, you know. But like just for that one night, and it's generally no.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ben. Like for certain special things, I can always like make an exception, but it's an exception because like basically there's no way around it.
Because like on one hand you get to experience.
I feel like being punished in order for this. If I want it bad enough, sure, but I'd have to want it crazy bad.
Because it's like on one hand you get to experience it live, which is like that's really cool, right? But it's really loud. There's people everywhere. It's like, you know, it can also be too much generally. So.
Too much, just like energy, just too much like for your senses to handle. But if you've never done it before, like I've never been to a concert, it would be interesting to see like what is the concert, like what do you do?
Experience it once, you know, just so you know you can know what it's like, you know.
One thing that for me, because I've been to one. It was Brandy Carlisle. As far as like there was that I liked that much. There was I was having a really rough time in life. Hearing that song, "The Story," it was like the greatest thing I ever heard at that time, and I was like, "That's amazing." So she was actually playing someplace, I don't remember. It was somewhere. I don't know when this was, but it happened. And all I remember is that I actually had to like really focus my code of conduct to make sure I paid proper attention to her during this moment. But while I was doing that, I also was saying to myself, I'm not doing this again. The amount of noise I was being bombarded with, it was a small venue. It was not big. That's why I even thought of trying to do it. But it was just the people, the noise, the smell. And the big one for me was, besides just the beat of it, when I was watching her, it was just me and Nexie. And I would release myself into the song. But I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't really think that the other fans actually had the headspace I did, and I didn't really enjoy sharing the experience with them. I mean, to be honest, I actually, having done it once, and I'm glad when I was there, I really tried to enjoy it. But I can't do that again. I could, but it was pretty much mostly work.
That's exactly how it feels. it's like when music for me is like the most sacred thing, and I feel like a rock band performing like I feel like churches should be like emptied out and then given to like rock bands. Basically, like no, I mean that sounds a little ridiculous, but
I feel you though. I feel that sentiment. I do.
I think you know, and people are there just like to like hook up or like get drunk with their friends or whatever, and it's like I can understand that, but it's like it feels like it's like it's almost like defiling. Like the jive for me feels like it's like defiling something sacred.
Yeah, at least to me, yeah.
Yeah, it's done for the wrong
I
reasons.
respect it. That's
Here for the wrong reasons.
But I don't like to share my trip with just anyone. I've learned that besides just the V like overstimulation, there's a heavy like G, or for me anyway, if you shy, I don't like to associate my any energy with just anyone. And the more I'm doing like something artistic or spiritual I'm into, the more finicky I get with who I swap energy with.
Right. It's the same way when it comes to like watching movies. In theaters, it can kind of get a little bit annoying if there's lots of people like eating away, crunching popcorn and sort of stuff like that. And even you need to be around people that are like they have a love for the movie. They've come here because they're interested in wanting to like see this through and like really like I want to see what this what this director did. Like it's it's an artistic experience. You want to give it the proper appreciation that it deserves. But yeah, I think I want to also mention what Bruno was talking about as far as like the feeling of like people not being as interested in the kind of topics that you're bringing up, because a lot of times Nijai and I think Naiji too, we ask questions that are like really challenging to answer because they're usually very new, they're very different, and people just don't have answers for them, and so they'll just be like, well, you're taking things a bit too seriously, you should just calm down and take a chill pill or something like that. And if that's done on a regular basis all the time, you have these thoughts in your head, you want to talk about these things, but you don't really have an area or anybody to talk to about those kinds of things, then that'll naturally make you feel like, like there's some part of you that's not being acknowledged in a very important way that it should be, and then that I think can lead to sort of like this kind of like you want to like express yourself in this kind of a way, but you're not given the space to do that. I understand this as a Naiji. It's curious to hear it from a Nijai perspective, though. You want to like talk about them, but you're not really given that space, and so then you find you kind of like explode these certain moments. You just like have this like you find somebody that they don't even know you, right? Like I think you're saying, but you just like start dropping a whole bunch of like stuff like, and so this and this and this, and then you like you want to talk to them about that, and then they're just like overwhelmed. They're like, whoa, where's all this coming from?
Because
like,
you don't often get that opportunity. You don't often get the opportunity.
Yeah, you just
want to like you just want to bounce on it, So.
For sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, that was an awesome session. I'm going to call it at a nice prompt time tonight because Infinity emailed he'll be coming over in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some middles and do that. But that was an awesome session.
Yeah, that was fun. Good combo.
Did you make Infinity noodles, Coach?
What's that?
I know you're chef. Did you make him?
No, he's kosher, so we ordered stuff that would be appropriate. We had
Okay.
Mediterranean.
But you are a chef, right, Coach? You like
chef. I kind of like the martial arts. Back in the day, I did like to cook for my friends a lot. I like to cook for my friends to bond. So
that's awesome.
I was a fairly serious foodie. Yeah.
I love it. All right, cool.
All right, everyone. Have a good night, and
good night, everyone.
Sunday.
All right.
See you on Sunday.
Peace.
On Friday.